Well, say
Sizzle.
something funny. Sean, go.
I'm not even put a
Say
mirror
something.
in front of your face. It looks
So I
funny.
tell this guy, is that a bear claw or is that your shoe?
Hello, and welcome to another Loyalty Cup review. Except that's a lie. Today we have something a little different for you guys. We're doing an explainer, a Loyalty Cup explainer. This is the first one of these we've done, so we're excited. We came out of Hereditary, and some of us liked it, some of us didn't. But in the end, we were left with a lot of questions, and I think we put in a lot of work.
Yeah, and we know we're not the only ones.
No, we're not, and we're not gonna be the only ones. But I think we have some answers to the questions, and if anything, it opens up a lot more questions that I think would make for a good discussion. So let's jump into it. Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit about the characters that we're going to be talking about?
All right. So this movie has a bunch of characters. Some are more significant than the others. So we thought it might be good to explain this and also have a few visuals just to help us along as we bounce from character to character throughout the film. So the movie starts with the death of the grandmother of this film, Ellen Lee. She's referred to as Queen Ellen in parts of the film. That can be of significance later. She wanted Annie, the mother, to keep Peter, the son. She spent lots of time with Charlie in the movie. That's significant. They show her breastfeeding her as a baby, which is kind of weird. They also just imply that Charlie was of super significance to the grandmother. The grandma wanted Charlie to be Charles, implying maybe a gender switch, or she was unhappy with it being a girl at one point.
Yeah, and actually, Charlie mentions it at some point that it's like, you guys wish I was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's always wearing the Pieman sigil on her neck.
Illustrate what?
You got
Yeah,
that right
right
there?
there.
Pieman.
Boom.
And I think it's slightly changed from ones I found online, but that's one they use in the movie from what I can tell. She spends lots of time secluded between the two different kids, and there was some kind of rift between her and Annie, the mother, and they kind of address that throughout the film. So the grandmother is a key figure starting out the film. Then we have Charlie. So Charlie is the daughter of Annie, the granddaughter of the grandma, Ellen.
And we actually, I was super surprised how little of the movie Charlie is actually in.
Super spoilers coming ahead, for
absolutely.
sure. So the trailer of this film makes it seem like Charlie is like the main character almost, and she may become haunted or something. But as we quickly find out, she's significant to it for sure for the whole film. Let's keep going. So basically, she's quiet. She appears socially inept. There's a scene where she's supposed to be doing a quiz in the classroom, and other students are doing the quiz, and she's making a little figure.
She's trouble.
She's trouble.
Yeah.
She likes to make do-it-yourself mannequins, and a lot of them have different parts of metal sewing equipment. She uses a bird head for one of these mannequins.
Severed animal heads.
Severed animal head. So that's a little troublesome. At one point, they even imply there's multiple severed animal heads. So she has a weird obsession with decapitation.
Mm-hmm.
She's close with Ellen, her grandma, and yeah, that's about it for now.
Yeah.
Her brother Peter, so the son of Annie, he's basically it implies he's a normal kid. He loves
Son
to
of
party,
Annie.
but he has this strong distrust of his mother, almost like a hatred, or you feel like there's some kind of background that they're not really.
Yeah.
They don't go into immediately.
To me, the closest thing to the audience surrogate, someone that is the most normal of the crop, can be the Peter or the Steve character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then it becomes more significant when things start happening to him. You realize he may not have been as affected as Charlie, but things are starting to happen to him, and that really starts driving the movie when he gets involved.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Annie. So she is one of the main characters. She's Charlie and Peter's mom. At one point in the movie, they talk about, or she acknowledges that she tried to miscarry Peter, and it becomes this whole scene, and Peter, is affected by this in certain ways. She has a lot of self-pity. She seems to be like the martyr of the film, where she has this self-doubt and she thinks she's to blame for everything. And that comes up a few times. One of the most significant characters that we're at some point introduced to is Pieman, this demon or spiritual entity that they bring into the film somehow.
And we might not be pronouncing it right. I say Pieman. He says
Pieman.
Pieman.
It's Pieman.
Pieman.
So they describe him as one of 8 kings of hell. He possesses the most vulnerable host, and so in the movie that takes place
A few times. It
a few
kind of bounces
times.
around.
But I don't know if that was in the script or if they signify that in the film somehow.
Yeah, maybe we want to clarify that too. It's a lot of this explainer will be this introduction of this Pieman character and how he shifts from place to place, but a lot of where we extrapolated this from is sure the watching of the film and what we were to pull out, but also research on Pieman and how he operates, because there is actual there's reference to it in like demonology. And also the script, we were able to get our hands on the script and read through the details, and there's some discrepancies between the two, but not a lot.
Yeah. So Pieman, he's known for his wisdom, his mischief, and his link to the cardinal directions in some way, and they bring that up a few times, either referencing west or northwest, and also the direction of the triangles involved in the film, and how I think at the end they even say we prayed to the northwest or we prayed to the west, so that's significant. He's described as having an effeminate or like androgynous face, but with a male body. He's pictured carrying around severed heads at one point. I think in one of the books they show an illustration. So there's an implication of decapitation or his obsession with cutting off heads of victims or his followers or something.
And I think that is a movie machination, because like in my reading of Pieman, like they really didn't mention anything about severed heads.
It made for a great horror film.
Yeah.
Everyone's head gets cut off.
Exactly.
He brings intellect and riches to those who summon him. So that's significant. At one point, the grandma's shown being showered with golden coins and everything, and that may change motivations for certain characters involved. So we also have Joan, who is first seen kind of in a circle at a self-help group that Annie goes to, and you don't even notice her at first, but later in the movie, Annie goes back to the self-help group, and Joan stops her and exchanges phone numbers and says, I think I can help you. I'm in a similar situation. So she plays a key element, mostly in the second half of the film. We also have Steve, the father. So he's the only one not in this direct bloodline, the Hereditary line. And he's almost skeptical of the motivations of grief and blame that Annie takes on. And there's a culmination of all this anger and pity, and there's some pretty good scenes with him. And long story short, he doesn't have such a good ending.
Yeah, I mean, Steve isn't really thickly involved in what we're going to be talking about. He kind of grounds the movie in some way. He's
similar
kind of
to Peter. He becomes the audience almost.
Yeah,
and so you can kind of just vicariously live through him as you're watching the film. There's also the dog Max, I believe his name was.
That
doesn't have a huge part in the movie, but there's one or two things that happens. So I thought I'd bring that up.
So so if we don't mention Steve a lot, that's why. It's because he really doesn't play a lot into the plot itself. Just smaller. His job is to suffer.
He's there just to kind of keep it moving.
Yeah. And on that note, let's jump into the beginning of the film. Sean, what can you tell us about that initial funeral procession and all that?
Yeah, it opens up with them, the father waking everyone up to get ready to go to this funeral. It's the grandmother has passed, so they show up at the funeral home, and the mother Annie is doing a eulogy for her mother, and she remarks on the amount of strangers at the funeral. She doesn't recognize most people. We then see the open casket with the grandmother laying there. She has the necklace with the Pieman sigil very prominently. And the daughter, Charlie, is standing there. She's watching everyone kind of pay their last respects, and she goes up to look at the corpse and notices the necklace, and also notices a strange smiling man in the line.
Yeah, just like a creep.
Yeah.
Like that's what I call, throughout this, as I was writing notes, I just called him, anybody who was involved with him in any way, they're just creeps.
Is that the blonde-haired man?
Yeah, the blonde-haired man.
And that is true. There are some support characters on here, but we're not really going to get into them too much. But the most notable one, I would have to say, is the smiling man. So that's the first time you see him. And we see Charlie eating chocolate, and it causes her parents some mild alarm, as she is allergic to nuts, we find out.
But there weren't nuts, or maybe there were nuts, but regardless, they were nervous about the chocolate.
They were nervous about her eating some nuts. They don't have the EpiPen.
It's important for later, but before we really dive into all the allergen stuff, we do go back to the house and find out some additional things about Ellen from her boxes, right?
We do. We find out that she's, at the very least, interested in spiritualism. She has some books on the subject. The mother, Annie, flips through them, kind of cursory, puts them back into the box, and as she's leaving the room, she notices her mother's apparition in the corner.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Right.
Yeah, there's a shadowy version of her mom just sitting there.
Is that why that eventually the Annie character believes that she's a medium?
Yeah, I think that might be true because she does have a moment to actually stare at it. It's not something that she just catches a glimpse
And didn't
of.
her husband say something like, "What's wrong?" and she wouldn't
She said that she got spooked, but I think that we're skipping ahead a little bit because the mother also goes in to console or to and to kind of calm her down and be like, see how she's doing. So she goes up there. Charlie's sad. She's worried that no one's going to help her out. That if grandma's dead and everyone else dies, who's going to take care of her? Implying that her grandmother is her source of protection. Mm-hmm. The mother's kind of taken aback by this, and she's wondering, we'll take care of you. This is no big deal.
And it is strange. It's like the daughter would almost have this complete, not necessarily mistrust, but like dismissal of the mother.
She has no faith.
Yeah, she's just like, well, grandma was my guy. Now she's gone.
And the mother goes into that as well and explains that, tries to reassure her and make her feel okay that, your grandmother loved you the most. It's pretty clear. And that and Charlie has some issue with that. She says, well, she wanted me to be a boy,
right?
Yeah, she always wanted me to be a boy. Yeah. The mother then brings up that Charlie never cries and maybe she should give it a little cry. Charlie doesn't want to hear anything about that, and so the mother leaves and goes to bed and talks about what she saw in the workshop.
Was there a portion in here where she found the grandmother's room, the door open with the triangle on the floor?
Yeah, there was at somewhere in between all of that too. She kind of cracks open. It's like when she sees that apparition, I think too. She kind of sees the door cracked open to the grandmother's room, and there is a triangle pointing to the northwest. Now, I don't know that from watching that movie. I know that from reading the script. It said pointing towards the northwest.
And something significant about that as well is I believe that the door is meant to be locked. So it's not just a matter of opening the door. It's a matter of someone unlocking and entering that room.
You know what? I'm actually going to skip us ahead a little bit. Is that okay? Because I think there's one part where it's almost designed for exposition, right? Like one of my least favorite things in plots is just like
exposition,
just an exposition bomb. But they use a really good plot device in that she goes to counseling, and at counseling, she's doing this of her own accord. She lies to her husband, says, "I'm gonna go." And
watch
go
a movie.
Go watch
a movie. She lies to her husband.
Yeah, and it's easy for us because she's done it in the past before too. But she goes to counseling. She talks about how she's usually very opposed to things like this, but she was forced to go in the past, and so she's trying it out again. And when they ask her, or it's not so much that they ask her, but they allow her to divulge about her recent loss of her mother, right, Ellen, which doesn't say Ellen, but her name is Ellen. Grandma. She explains that they didn't have a great relationship and that their family before had been under a lot of turmoil, particularly Annie's brother, who's unnamed, kills himself because he believes that Ellen, grandma, was putting people inside of him. So he was schizophrenic and then he hung himself. So we start to see this past that the grandma has with the occult or with summoning other entities. You could even extrapolate that it was originally Pieman, and she was trying to put Pieman inside of her son.
Well, and I think the important thing about that scene is that she's so frantically saying all this stuff in this rage, after her mother passed. As a viewer, you almost pass over it. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't become significant until you go to the end and start backtracking about how all this hereditary thing was passed through.
And something else that is divulged in that moment, because this is an exposition dump, it is literally said in one paragraph of lines. She also says, I'm looking here, that when she had Peter, she would not let Ellen near her son, right? And we know that later on in the movie, she actually didn't want to have Peter and even tried to force a miscarriage. We also learned that she allowed Ellen back into their lives when Charlie came around, and because of the guilt of not letting her be near Peter, she says the words, I basically gave her Charlie. So Charlie then becomes grandma's almost like secluded grandchild that she could have all to herself. Mm-hmm. Do you guys want to talk about the scene where Charlie back at the house sees something out in the field?
Yeah, so jumping ahead, we see Charlie in her treehouse. This is where she prefers to be. She is in the treehouse, correct?
I don't know.
It's unclear where she is.
Is this the scene where she stands up on her bed and looks out the window?
I think that's where
and then she runs outside with no shoes on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she's standing up on her bed. She sees something out of her
Pull up the
window.
script.
And she runs outside to see what it is. And as she gets closer, she sees a woman kneeling in front of a fire. Is that correct?
Yeah. Or in the script, it says that she's propped up upright.
It's super quick, though. It gives you just enough time to see it and not evaluate what's going on.
Yeah, in my initial viewing of the movie, I saw nothing. Like, I saw a bright light and fire, but it was less than half a second of a shot, it felt like.
Yeah, and it's very quick. And at that moment, the mother, Annie, just scoops up Charlie, just really gets on her case for going outside. She does not see what Charlie has been looking at. She's not concerned with it. She chides her for going out with no shoes on and no coat, brings her inside, and then we get to the next scene. Bear with us, it's about to get juicy. So the son, Peter, gets a text invite to go to a party. He asks his mother, can I get the keys to the car? She asks him, are you going to be drinking? He's a little,
He's coy about it.
Yeah, and he's also just being a kid. And trying to trick his mom. His mom knows the score. He tells her that he's not going to be drinking.
She actually doesn't seem like she knows.
She kind of assumes that he's going to drink.
Yeah.
And so then kind of gives him his sister to kind of...
It's a weird thing. She doesn't seem either hip to it or privy.
Or particularly bothered if he does.
Yeah, it's almost just like...
Just don't lie to me.
Yeah.
So... he insists that he's not going to drink. She insists that he takes his sister with him to the party, which I found ludicrous. He's just kind of like, all right, well, if that's what it takes to get the car, I'll take my sister. So she invites Charlie. Charlie doesn't want to go. The mother insists that she goes and gets some time in with some friends and some kids her age. They head out. On the way there, if you'll notice, there's a mark. The sigil is actually on the post that they drive past. They get to the party. You'll see some kids chopping up nuts. These are walnuts, and they're making a cake at their party.
Yeah, this is probably the silliest part of
this. This is a weird.
Like, why would at a high school party people just baking cake with so many walnuts?
Those are expensive.
That took me out of that was like the random weird part that took me out of the movie. Like, why is this teenager so excited about all these walnuts?
And why is no one seems to care that there's a troubled, weird-looking little girl wandering the premises.
She's totally out of place.
She's out of place, and no one says a word. They're just like, oh, your sister. Cool.
Yeah.
Keep her busy. We're going to go smoke some weed. So that's what they do. They get stoned. She gets a piece of cake, Mealy gets sick. Peter grabs her, throws her in the car. They're hauling ass down the street, which, again, no ambulance. Does he know the way?
There's no EpiPen in the car.
There's nothing.
Like, why wouldn't you have one in the glove
people
compartment?
don't care that this girl is apparently deathly allergic.
Yeah, that at any given point she could die.
Yeah.
And so she's gasping for air. She opens the window, puts her head completely out the car to try to get air.
To force
as he's speeding.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you're thinking, you know what you're thinking. They're going to crash. Something's going to happen.
I thought she was going to fly, because I hadn't connected the pole yet. But
Yeah.
I thought she was going to fly out the window.
So, they're hauling. She sticks her head out the window to force some air down her neck. He sees a dead coyote, swerves. And just an incredible... This man screamed in a theater. The whole audience just, shook.
Well, we all know what happened. What's distinct is that particularly
It doesn't
she
show
was
it.
decapitated.
She's decapitated. Her head's gone.
It's implied.
Yeah.
So...
Well, and then they show her decapitated head.
Right. So jumping ahead, Peter gets home. He's like, I'm going to sleep this one off. His mom comes out, finds the body.
Yeah.
And then, so that is basically the climax of the film, I would say.
Sort of.
That starts the rest of the movie.
Starts, and so this is like kind of this inflection point in the movie, because there is, and we're going to gloss over a lot of things, because what it is this sort of emotional buildup in this like web of emotional and relational connections. And we're not here for that. We're here for the ghost stuff. So we're going to talk about how basically we're going to skip ahead to where Pieman jumps back into the picture. So in the sort of aftermath of this death, Joni...
She works her way in.
She finesses Annie.
Right. She catfishes her. Is that true?
Honey
potting.
Real life catfish? It's just a con.
Yeah, she conned her.
Yeah.
She's a confidence woman. At some point, she slips a mailer into the mail slot.
I forgot about
We're
that.
going to assume that that's her. It's advertising a seance. It doesn't work. So instead, she reaches out to her. Annie goes to the support meeting, tries to take off. Joni gets in there and gives her the number. They just kind of have a discussion. There we find out that a little bit more about Annie and her relationship to her family.
Yeah.
A lot more of that. Something of note, though, is that she is given tea and takes a drink from the cup and removes something from her mouth.
Like a black leaf.
Yeah, some type of black leaf. And Joni notices her doing it. You notice it, and it doesn't come up again. However,
in the script, and it's not in the movie, and it could have been taken out for various reasons. It might have been too cryptic to really put in the movie. Or for all we know, like if we went back and watched it, it might be in there for a second. But in the script, it specifies that there is a photo that's, it's a little bit later on in the plot, but there is a photo that shows young Charlie being bottle fed by grandma, and in that bottle there's kind of a grisly looking black herb. Like it makes a point to say that it's kind of gross.
So are we led to believe that maybe that is some type of ritual tea that can allow, open you up to spiritual suggestion and kind of make you an instant medium?
So at this point we know that Joan is trying to, and this is a little bit of why we laid these out here, so we can show you that Pieman is not in the picture quite yet, but we know that Joan is trying to make that happen, and her first contact is really with Annie. So we have them meet, and we know that Joan is trying to finesse Annie. They have, we'll kind of, you guys have seen the movie, so we won't dive into their bonding. But really, what ends up happening is that they have an initial seance, right, where Joan teaches her how to summon spirits
and demonstrates it by channeling her dead grandson,
which we don't know if it's actually her dead grandson.
Right, it could just be some parlor trick, some other demon. Maybe it's Pieman.
Maybe
doing
it's
some
Pieman.
Cool
yeah.
We don't even know she has a grandson. I mean, she's probably just lying. But something of note is that she does, and I guess you see this in the movie, but you do find out that Annie's mother used to make these welcome mats, and you see that at the very beginning when she gets to the house, and she's like, hey, my mom does the same stuff, and Joni's like,
she passes it off.
Yeah, weird. And so then they move on. So that's your first hint that something is not quite right here, that there is something going on that we're not quite hip to yet.
So that initial seance happens where she's learned on how to summon, and it says in the script that they're going off of this Sanskrit script to read, and that's how you initially start to summon up Pieman, or the dead, and that's the pretense that you're summoning the dead, right? To people who have passed away. And so what happens is we get a second seance in the movie, and it happens with now we have the characters from home. So Jones kind of actually takes a back burner in the movie for a little bit, so that Annie and Steve and Peter can try to basically summon Charlie back up. And it's so a lot of basically Steve is really adverse to this whole thing, and Peter is kind of game, but mostly because I think he's trying to search for a connection back to her mother. The seance starts, and it happens a little differently than it does in the first scene, in that Peter is almost immediately affected, and he mentions it, like, do you guys feel the air flexing? And then, after a couple of things happening, the candle turns on, and it's like there's a jet of propane, and Annie is actually overtaken. Like, there's a moment where there's just these guttural groaning, that's how it's described in the script, and then she starts speaking like Charlie, right? She starts going, mommy, right? This is what we are to believe, and this is kind of the idea that I think we have to push too, is that Charlie and Pieman, as far as the script is concerned, are essentially the same thing. So that means that Charlie and all of her idiosyncrasies were really signaling to help us understand that there was something deeper within her. So for the sake of this video, I think going forward, we're going to assume that these are the same person, but we're going to use the Pieman totem, if you will. So move this aside, and right now, Annie is possessed. Boom. Possession. Nothing special happens or occurs with this possession except that it's just creepy and that we hear that it's Charlie's voice.
As a horror film, it's so terrifying because her voice changes to that girl voice that you recognize from earlier in the film, and Charlie's been dead. And Peter starts freaking out. He recognizes the voice. He says, "Put a stop to this. I can't handle this."
Yeah.
And that's when it really ramps up.
Yeah, so the dad snaps her out of it, throws some water on her face. Now she's back to normal. We're to assume that she is no longer possessed.
And she didn't know what had happened either.
Right.
A key thing, too, is that there's this idea that you need to have a link. At least Joni tells Annie that you need to have a physical link of an object that belonged to your daughter.
Right.
Also something we forgot to mention is that Joni tells her, listen, to do this seance, to get it right, you need to have your whole family there, your son needs to be there. So we have this link, and she uses a notepad that Charlie used to draw in.
Yeah.
And we also have the son in the mix. We're gonna jump a little bit more because there's still some emotional background stuff that starts happening in reaction to this seance thing, but what we know now is that Pieman, in one way or another, has been summoned, and Peter is the one that's being most affected. In fact, in school, he kind of has a breakdown and calls his father, and in the script, Steve, the father, specifies to Annie, he says he's under attack by some vengeful spirit. He feels like he's under attack.
They say that in the movie as well.
They say it that way?
So he kind of accuses Annie and is like, this is your fault, basically, for putting these ideas in his head. He's already a guilty, troubled youth, after going through what he has. And now you're just piling on with him. And this is not doing anyone any favors.
So it's at this point that Steve is a skeptic through and through, all through the movie. But I think the family still isn't sure that there's something spiritual going on, but rather that Peter has become just emotionally debased, right? He's attacked that first time at school, and really what ends up happening is it's that he's possessed and his arm is pinned up into the air,
his
right?
face is contorted.
Well, what happens before that, he runs into what I believe to be a bit of possession when he's under the bleachers smoking pot.
Oh, that's right.
And his throat, he acts like his throat has swollen up and that he can't breathe.
Right.
And they don't really talk about that much, and we'll talk about that.
I think we can talk about it now, right?
Well, it's more of a theory. I believe that they're just that they're testing the waters with being able to send Pieman into Peter.
Directly into
him, and they're not quite there yet. So that's the first instance of that.
But it didn't work.
It didn't work.
Well, and I think it's so early on in the movie, you almost feel that it may be sympathy pain, he's grieving after his sister died.
Right, if you're still not quite sure
he feels responsible for it.
Yeah, if you're not sure that things are happening, you can still kind of believe that this is all in everyone's head. But we do see him pretty much possessed for real after he is out at lunch, kind of zoned out. He's sitting there with his lunch, and he sees Joan across the street hurling just spells at him.
Yeah, it's such a great scene because there's all this noise and the wind, and you see Peter hanging out in outside where these cafeteria tables sort of are, and amongst everything going on, there's just this isolated moment where she's yelling at the top of her lungs. She's basically trying to cast out Peter's soul from his body to leave the vessel for Pieman,
She's
right?
basically doing a banishing ritual on Peter himself.
Nobody else sees what's going on.
Yeah, it seems like he's primed for it because no one else seems to hear it, and he's focused in on it. And even the way the camera works, it looks like he's hyper focused on this tunnel vision
on it. So
now. And it might be working because something that we kind of glossed over before, there's this other indicator of when Pieman is around, and it's this glint, right? At least I'm calling it a glint. I'm not sure.
Light.
Yeah, it's a light. And what it looks like is basically some refracted light, but it'll spread out and focus in certain places. I actually think it's a really beautiful device. But you see it initially with Charlie at one point, and then it occurs again here with Peter. He's going back into class, and I think this is after the casting out of his soul, right? Or the attempt to cast out of his soul.
when he's in the class and he pretty much becomes possessed for real.
Yeah. For a moment.
He snaps. I don't know if he snaps himself out of it or if it's again just not a good hold, but I mean you've seen it. His throat swells up, his arms up in the air. He has no control over his body. He's very rigid.
He slams his face into the desk.
Repeatedly smashes his face in the desk in front of everyone. And,
I thought it was really effective.
And he yells out "mommy" or something, doesn't he?
Well, that might just be, if that is the case, just He does do that a lot.
Did Charlie do the similar thing in the seance, though? Was she yelling out for her mom?
I think it is like Pieman as Charlie,
Charlie's
trying to reach out.
just confused and is now in her brother, but is not herself. This it's a little convoluted.
And to be sure, I mean, this is how we're kind of interpreting it, because it is very open to interpretation, right?
It's pretty loose.
Yeah, and so these are sort of questions left up in the air, and some of them even feel like just plot holes. So from what we can tell, what's happening is that Pieman and Charlie tried to possess Peter in that moment, and it just didn't work, and we're not sure why.
Yeah, there may be something that we're missing there, but we can't quite figure it out.
So tried, didn't work.
So he goes home. At the same time, I think Annie is now investigating her mother's belongings. She's pretty much convinced that she can contact Charlie and has evidence of it. She has Charlie's sketchbook, which is filling up with just images of Peter's head crying and being ripped off.
With his eyes X'd
out. So she goes to investigate her mother's things, finds a photo album.
Yeah.
We see that Joni is actually a friend of her grandmother.
Yeah, don't forget though that it kind of for a minute turns into this like episode of House where there's all the investigations going on, but she does at some point go to visit Joni to get some sort of explanation. Now she doesn't see this, but we do.
Yeah.
But there's a pan into the house, and we see on top of Joni's table all of these sort of mannequins, these DIY mannequins and totems that Charlie was building at some point. Witch stuff. Which is just like a smattering of witch stuff.
There's spooky things. Yeah. She got, but something that, shows dedication, she did carve that triangle into the wood table. So that's nice.
Yeah.
She means business.
She does.
But Joni's nowhere to be found. The house is empty.
And that's when she realizes she connects the rug, or I'm sorry, the mat.
Yeah, to her mother. Finds evidence of this in the boxes. She has just a collection of mats in there, so we know.
Yeah.
And then finds a bunch of pictures indicating that Joan is part of the coven, that her grandmother or her mother was the leader of this coven, and
of the creeps.
That her family has been the subject of at least a ritual at least once before. There's photographic evidence of it, so we can see that. So this sends her up the steps. Finds the dead body of her mother, lots of flies. Finds the sigil on the wall above the corpse, and she flips out, basically.
Steve goes to pick up Peter, and you get this nice little emotional beat in there, but who cares? We go back to the home where things are still going on, right? Because we already made a discovery about Joni, and now she discovers the body.
Yeah, and he comes home to this. She's rushing out to meet him to tell him about what she's encountered, and he does not want to hear anything about it. He just
tells her to shut up and carry the body.
Grab the boy.
Well, there's one thing that is important before Peter is brought back home is the burning scene, where she tries to burn the book because she's just trying to basically get rid of whatever it is that's going on, and the only way she can think of to do it is to go and burn the notepad that Pieman may or may not be inside of. And when she goes to do it, she starts lighting on fire. It's not hugely significant as to what eventually ends up occurring, but it is kind of an idea of how Pieman operates.
Right, because you're led to believe that this book is the conduit between the spirit world and Annie, and that if she goes to destroy that link, which she believes is the link. It's just something she kind of came up with. That if she goes to try and destroy this link, that she will in turn destroy herself. And as a deterrent, we find out that is not necessarily the case. It was a trick.
Which is like, I can see why she would think that. And the movie kind of leads you to believe otherwise. Like Pieman just kind of operates on his own.
Yeah.
But that's still kind of up in the air too. Like,
which, it could be a defect in the plot, but if you have to kind of create your own narrative at points in this movie. So if you do that, for me it worked, that this is the link that she is led to believe she cannot destroy without destroying herself.
So now Steve comes home with Peter, and Annie is so eager to tell Steve what's going on before she realizes that Peter's just passed out in the back.
And he's hurt.
Yeah, and he's his nose looks like it's broken. So they lift him up together out of there, and it's at this point, it's like not necessarily an exposition dump because we've watched everything that's going on, but Steve is just getting caught up. But if you're a normal human being of the earth and some lady in a crazy hysteria starts telling you everything that occurred to her in that day.
There's a body in the attic. We're haunted.
Yeah. So, I mean, she just sounds insane because she kind of is. Also.
And he's exhausted. He's been dealing with this. He's lost a child. You know what I mean?
He's lost, and he's about to lose another. So, what transpires is essentially Annie's like, listen, the only way that we're going to get rid of this, it has to be me. I have to make the sacrifice. Here's this martyrdom that kicks in. But she says, listen, you got to toss this book away. And she, in her mind, it's like she's sacrificing herself. Because when the book is burnt, she will be burnt. But then they'll be rid of all this evil that's going on. And Steve's
not the case.
No, and Steve's not game. Steve's like,
he's at this point still believes that she has done all this. That this is all in her mind, and that there are some unexplainable things, but he really just has no patience for it.
She showed him the body. He acknowledges that. He says, "You're crazy. You dug up your mother's corpse. You put her in the attic. There's no magic. There's no spiritual beings. There's no demons. You're making this up. We need to get you help. You need medical help."
So they try it. So, after he refuses to throw the book in, so she decides to do it. She throws it in, and he lights on fire in the
he
script.
goes up quick.
Yeah, it's immediate. It's actually really effective. In the script, it actually says, like, clockwork, right? So it dives in. He's on fire. I love her reaction. She just doesn't...
She's in disbelief.
Yeah, she's like, what just happened? Like, that's not what was supposed to happen.
But that expression quickly changes when basically he hits the ground. And now we see that she has been taken over by Pieman.
Yeah.
That now she is possessed. And then the movie goes a little ham, as you know, for the remainder.
Let's dive into that a little bit, because I think, for other viewers, you could extrapolate that maybe Pieman was tied to that book in some way or another and then hopped now into Annie.
I think
that's
it was
his new
that,
vessel.
or it could just be a device that he used to trick her into thinking that she knew what to do to fix it, and that when she got to that point, it was really he could put the fire on anyone. That it was somehow linked to the family. But it was his choice where it went. That he could not basically set fire to someone, but in the act of doing so, in the act of the book being burnt, that could be transferred.
Am I crazy, or isn't there a scene when they're near the fireplace where the light goes into Annie? Don't you visually see that? Or is that when Peter comes down?
It might be the case.
She gets hit by like it passes through her, over her features, and that's when her expression changes, and we're led to believe that a change has occurred.
Another way to explain that too is that we know in the script it specifies that Pieman goes into the most vulnerable of hosts. And
Very vulnerable at that point.
Yeah, and it might be at that point that where her beliefs as to how it all works, like she thinks she has it all figured out, that's just turned upside down, and so she's vulnerable. But the thing is that now that Pieman is in Annie, but that's not the end goal, right? So we understand from how you describe the character, but also the research that Annie does in the books, is that Pieman, it's really important that he is in a male host. So he needs to get to this final host. And you may or may not understand that while you're watching the movie the first time, but if you do the work, you start to understand that what Pieman is trying to do is take over a male host. So right now we've got Annie. Annie's taken over, and then we have Peter. He's asleep in the bed.
So Peter wakes up. He's fully clothed. He's in pain. He's wondering what's happened.
And the house is pitch black.
He wakes up in darkness. In the corner, you see the mother being a creep. He wakes up and he sees in the treehouse the heaters turn on. He sees that light, which illuminates the room. You see the mother do more creepy things. So he goes downstairs, and you may be wondering, why can he not smell just the burnt corpse of his father? I guess it's because his nose is broken. Is that why that happened? Maybe. Who knows? But he doesn't know anything has happened yet. He goes downstairs. The house is trashed. He sees the piano knocked over. Everything is kind of in disarray. He then finds his father, knows him by the wedding ring, trips out. You see the mother. She's up in the rafters being a creep still. And then he hears a noise, turns, and sees the smiling creep, from the funeral.
That was one of the more effective moments of dread for me.
If you walk down, you find your dead father, you're hurt, and there's a naked man in your house, that's horrifying.
With a grimace, it's just like
just smiling at you naked.
I think why it's so effective is he's just a spectator. He's not
there to do anything. Yeah, he's there to he's just
he has a front row seat to the terror.
And his floppy's out.
Oh, his wiener's there too.
Yeah, it's not like suggested nudity. It's like, his
I
floppy's
have to
there.
approve the penises in my house. It breaks down the walls of
You
security.
gotta fill out the paperwork.
Exactly. There is a chain of there's paperwork. Yeah. So seeing that, something sets him off. His mother is on his tail. He runs straight up the attic.
And at this point, it's a chase, right?
At this point, we're coming to the coming to the end.
A lot is going on at once too. At this point in the script, there's no dialogue. It's just describing what it is that's going on.
Right.
He heads up to the attic, and in the attic, he locks himself in, ostensibly just trying to get away from his mother. Mm-hmm. And that's where he discovers the body. He sees the sigil above the body.
Well, it's the stain now.
The body was gone.
The body's
it's
gone.
The stain, and his picture is there with the eyeballs crossed out.
Very
out.
spooky.
Yeah, very.
Actually, I thought it was kind of freaky too. Freaked me out a little bit.
Put yourself in his position.
Yeah. And then you hear a noise.
Yeah, it's very wet.
The noise, it really was like
splashy.
Wait, what noise are you guys talking about?
The blood?
Oh, okay. But to me, what I remember is like the actual
rhythm,
sawing noise.
And there's a weird rhythm to it too. So she's using piano wire, just a lot of back and forth, and she's looking at him while she's doing it.
Floating in the corner of the attic too.
She's up. Yeah,
she's up
in the rafters.
She's kind of framed by moonlight.
It's beautiful. It's a good shot.
It is great.
And then at this moment, he notices there's more naked people in his house.
He's surrounded.
He's surrounded by naked people, and this is the breaking point for him.
He's framed in the background with the window of the attic.
You know what's happening.
Yes.
He considers it a dream, finds out very quickly that it is not.
That is a great moment. That he's like,
wake up.
There is no way all of this is possible. I need to wake up.
Yeah, it's too much of a nightmare.
What scares him enough that finally throws him out the window?
He sees other people in
very
the attic.
close to him.
Okay.
He realizes there's like
creeps.
3 of them. 3 creeps.
Yeah.
They're all over the place.
And
so
they're
he throws himself as like a flight response out the window. He's gone. He hits the ground. And then we hear the mother's body hit the attic floor.
Mm-hmm. Now this part, I was confused at on the initial viewing. I viewed it as you see this dark, what is a shadow essentially, move away from Peter, but in the script it suggests it's not
headless shadow.
Yeah, that it's a shadow. It's actually the shadow, and you're seeing her moonlight shadow essentially from up above.
It's a good shot.
Float past him,
and then you see the glint, as you call it, hit Peter in the back. He wakes up and he gets to see. First thing is his mother,
headless,
floating into an illuminated treehouse.
But it's not Peter anymore, right? Because what does he do? That's really
he clicks. And if you have seen this in the theaters, you already hate the sound.
You either love it or you hate it, depending on who you're sitting next to.
Yeah, if you're sitting in a theater full of people who saw the movie for free, you will want to kill yourself. It's like there's just bubble wrap throughout the theater. Everyone thinks they're hilarious, and they're being encouraged. Yeah. Don't do this.
Don't laugh when somebody clicks in your theater.
Shun them.
Yeah. Give them a dirty look.
It's ruined.
It was a fun crowd.
I had a great time.
So Peter at this point this is where it's really at this point where you as an audience member feel like now I'm going to need some explanation, because he stands up upright. He looks confused because he's not himself. We are to think, and it's really only after research that I understand this, but we're to think that he's Pieman and or Charlie. It's like this 3-4 situation going on.
And I think that's strengthened because when he goes out the window, you assume he's dead. He sits there lifeless for a few seconds, and it's not only it's until Pieman's light goes into him that he awakens again and stands up and has the ability to be normal again. So I think that really strongly implies he's being taken over by something.
So he stands up, he looks a little bewildered, but what he starts following is the floating corpse of his mother, his headless mother, and she floats back towards the treehouse. So he's looking a little despondent, a little confused, a little glassy-eyed.
He's dazed.
he's dazed. He starts following his mother. He goes up the stairs, and it's in here that we see... Sean, take it away. You gotta tell me what's going on here.
He goes up the steps, and it's full of people, naked folks, worshiping at something. We see the headless corpse of his mother, still bleeding. We see the headless grandmother, rotten and gross. We also see an effigy with Charlie's face pulled over. It's like a life-size artist model. It looks creepy. And Charlie is then crowned as Pieman, one of the kings of hell.
You mean Peter is crowned?
I'm sorry. The crown was on Charlie.
The decapitated head of Charlie. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the crown is taken from that, put onto Peter to clear that up. He is crowned the king of hell.
Now, in the movie, I think there are 2 crowns. I think there's like the one in the...
I don't think we go back and get to see.
Okay.
Maybe it's a different crown.
To me, it just looked like a totally different crown, but that might just be
and
me
the whole
misremembering.
time, we're really just seeing...
Oh, we see a portrait of the grandma of Ellen, and it just says Queen Lay, which is her last name.
Yeah, and so at this point, you're sitting there thinking, well... what the hell's going on? And so you hear Joan's voice basically explaining what has happened, that they have completed a summoning of Pieman, and that they do this to gain riches, favorable familiars. Basically, it's very earthly, very just simple wants and needs.
Yeah.
It really kind of puts it into, like, all they want is, it's just greed. It's just black magic. They just want to further themselves and have earthly riches. That's really all they want.
But they do say that they pledge their allegiance to him.
Yeah,
Pieman.
for the good stuff.
For the good stuff.
That's all they want.
It is weird to be so like, hey, so now that you're here, give us the things I like.
Give us you work for me
and
now.
at the point when they crown Peter, you hear shifting and the bodies all start praying towards him, which is super eerie.
The whole thing is super eerie because it's
creepy. Very close.
I don't remember if there's music playing. Is there? I think there is.
Recall.
But it is like the room feels claustrophobic and everyone's naked and some of them are bodies. But what is particular to this scene, I think that needs, for me, is either a plot hole or needs some explanation, is that she doesn't immediately call Peter Pieman. He calls him, or Joni calls Peter Charlie. She's like, Charlie, it's okay, it's okay. So what's confusing, and I'll lay this out because to me it's a glaring plot hole, is that Pieman kind of has different personalities. At some point it's Charlie and she's saying, mommy, help me, or mommy, or she's confused, or she straight up acts as Pieman and is running around the house slamming people's heads into things, cutting heads off.
Yeah, I think, and that is something weird. There is like a weird duality between Charlie and Pieman that is hard to kind of wrap my head around. But I think when she's speaking to Charlie, it makes sense because that is the personality that has basically been trained and raised and vetted to be the vessel for Pieman, and because if we're going to talk, because it's like a female soul with the male-oriented demon kind of melded together. So it's kind of like, the balance, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and that, that's from reading up on Pieman, that's kind of the way that he looks, right? So this idea of the androgynous effeminate face on a male body. Is there anything else here that needs to be explained? Oh, there is the fact that there are 2 corpses in the front. So there's like maybe half a dozen people in there worshiping. They all have their faces pressed to the floor. But in front of all of them, closest to Peter, is the corpse of, I believe, Steve, and I believe her mother, right? Headless corpses.
Oh, no, I saw that as the grandmother.
Oh, the grandmother.
Yeah, I think that's the 2 of them. Because it was wearing, I think, a nightgown.
That's right. Like that. That's right. And it's at this point that they all just start chanting, "Hail Pieman, Hail Pieman."
The movie ends.
That's it. Oh my God, that ending! It was so still, quiet, stirring that it was so creepy, but it was also so confusing.
But real powerful too, because you just see Charlie or Peter's just emotionless face, crowned, just staring as they kind of explain what's happened. I thought it was pretty effective.
So now that we've kind of explained everything that occurs in the plot, we know we ran through a lot. There's a lot to take in, but I think we're going to dive into some of our thoughts on some of what might be plot holes and some of our theories as to what's going on in the film itself. All right, so we went through a lot. I'm sure there's things that we missed. There's a lot to cover, but I do want to dive into. I actually have a whole list of questions here. We're not going to go into all of them, but I do think we can dive into some of these ideas we have about the movie. Sean, you had a really interesting theory about the allergy.
Yeah, which apparently no one else shares. But I believe that in this film, there's one of two things happening. Either we're to believe that the family doesn't really care that Charlie is affected by a clearly fatal nut allergy, or there's something else going on. I found this to be a plot hole until I started to think about it a lot. And if we're maybe to believe that there is a protection spell on Charlie, and that she was born pretty weak, and that she needed more help basically surviving. And so they used kind of white magic on her to kind of minimize her nut allergy as much as they could. And that's why everyone just kind of treats it more like a nuisance, like not really a huge problem.
Almost like it hasn't come up.
Right. Like they know that she's sick and that it's, uncomfortable and it's something they have to deal with, but it's not a life and death issue. So I believe that has happened, and then it is removed when the grandmother dies. Right. So now Joni's in power. She has no hereditary link to the family. And so she wants the glory of summoning Pieman, and she wants it now.
Whoa, now I agree with this. That's because to me, I couldn't understand why all of this needed to happen after the grandma died. But that makes sense. This idea that she basically was protecting the football, and then she left herself vulnerable after she died, and so Joan swoops in to take in the riches.
Swoops in to get the riches. And so in doing so, and for all we know, she had something to do with the grandmother's death as well. We don't know that.
Yeah, we don't
the
know.
whole thought with black magic is to get earthly gains quickly for yourself. And so I think that explains the nut allergy and why it's just kind of glossed over, and why it's treated with a panic when it happens. Clearly, you have to, but you have to get her help quick. But I just didn't believe that they were all just so lackadaisical about her fatal nut allergy.
I have a theory about, and it's not too huge of a leap, I think, that the way it works out in my mind, about Peter. So this idea in the script is that Peter was not given access to grandma, right? Or grandma did not have access to Peter, right? So we know that Annie didn't want to have Peter. She tried everything in her power to miscarriage it. So I think we are to extrapolate, or maybe you could theorize that essentially grandma really wanted Peter originally to be Pieman. That was supposed to be what the case was.
Well, yeah, she wanted her own son.
Yeah,
Pieman.
And you can pull that out of it too, that Annie's brother should have been Pieman at some point.
When the scene when Annie and Peter are talking and she's blurting out all these facts like, I did everything to abort you, I did everything to have a miscarriage, it almost seemed like she wasn't in control of what she was saying. Like it seemed truthful.
Well, it was a dream.
Yeah.
Oh, it was? Mm-hmm. I missed that part.
Yeah, it was like kind of a hallucination. So if Peter was originally supposed to be it, but wasn't, because she really, like overtly in the script says, or even in the movie says, I didn't let her near him. And so he didn't get to do that, and luckily for him, because he got to be a normal teenager. But she did get her clutches on Charlie. So either she was able to, during that pregnancy, get Pieman infused with Charlie, or
she gave her titty for the milk.
Oh,
we don't see that,
It's
but
in the diorama.
There are dioramas, like little hints going on that are kind of weird. Like the mother is very aware of what was happening, but I do believe that it had something to do with her old milk.
So essentially my theory is that, which isn't too huge of a leap, because I think the movie's telling you these things, that Pieman skipped Peter and went to the other part of the hereditary line into Charlie.
And it does say that it goes to the most vulnerable, and she is very much so. She needs help. She needs care. She needs someone to look after her. Yeah. There is a lot of
Pandemonium.
A lot of inscribing in the, was it the headboards or the walls?
The walls behind the headboards.
Yeah, the wallpaper. And we're shown this, but I don't know what that was. It's something clearly spooky. Annie knew about it. She noticed it. She actually included it in her drawing, like in her artwork.
Yeah.
So she's aware of a lot more than she says in this movie. You kind of pick up on, and so you don't really know where she stands on all this. If she had a change of heart or what. But going back to the inscriptions, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, and I in putting all this together, that was where maybe I failed to really dive deep into it. But after even just like a few quick Google searches, I wasn't really able to extrapolate exactly what those mean, so that's kind of left up in the air.
Some type of spell work, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm assuming the grandma did it, right? Yeah.
I think between that and the repetitive triangles and the sigils showing up, they all just come to this conclusion of this is part of the ritual.
Yeah.
And it just has to happen, and you have to take it for granted until you realize what they're doing with Pieman. As a viewer, you just say, oh, it's creepy, and then it doesn't build up till the end. So I think if we backtrack it, we may be able to more concisely figure out.
Yeah, to be fair, we have watched this movie once, but we did read the script, thought about it a lot. But there's certainly some things that we are missing. So let us know.
Yeah, if you can fill in the holes, fill in the gaps. We have gaps and holes that need to be filled
Fill
in.
them.
Yeah, please fill them.
Aching to be filled.
Otherwise, if we're totally off base on some of this stuff,
For me, I didn't like the movie when I watched it. So a lot of this I had to, because I took it as plot holes until the more I thought about it, the more it kind of made sense that a lot of things went unsaid. And so you do have to kind of make these leaps. And so some of these leaps we've made,
and they work out. They're pretty clean, and some of them aren't. Yeah.
Yeah, some are,
So let us know what you think, what ideas, what sort of theories that you might have. And I've got nothing else for this, right?
I think we're good.
We'll see you in the next one.